Predictably, the view down the long bonnet when you're driving this thing is fantastic. And actually, for me, there's not too much of a problem with wind turbulence coming over the screen, but then I'm not particularly tall. For taller drivers, it would be a problem, but one that's easily rectified. Not so easily rectified is the fact that there is not a lot of space in here, and taller drivers are going to be cramped, which is a shame, because you're missing out on a lot. But then we shorties miss out on a lot too, so I don't care, it's your problem. One problem that will affect everybody though, and explains my reason for crawling along now, is grounding out. I reckon this thing is only about as far from the floor as an ant's delicates, and probably about as fragile, so I'm being very careful. It isn't my car. As a drive, with the little 1.4 beating out about 85 bhp up front, and the car itself weighing about as much as a half-empty packet of Rice Krispies, it's as much fun as you'd expect it to be. It does bounce around a little bit at the front. The feeling with the steering is perhaps a little bit vague, but then it isn't my car. You don't know the setup, it's somebody else's, and you could adjust this thing minutely to your own preference, I'm sure. There are times when an act of sheer madness pays dividends, as it did in this case, such as nicking off with somebody's demonstrator for an afternoon and giving it a good spanking around Welsh roads. I enjoyed that, and I don't think I can think of a better car to do it in, certainly not a better style. It's a simple concept, think about it. Take a nice 1.4 litre engine, fairly small, about 85 brake horsepower, put it in a rigid, decent chassis, and all you've got to do is cover the mechanical oily bits in some kind of bodywork and you've got a success. But it is more complicated than that. Any designer will tell you simplicity is a difficult thing to get right. In other words, you haven't got to get much wrong for the whole thing to be thrown out of kilter and not work. In this case, I think it does work. The chassis is rigid enough to handle that much power. And the bodywork, though minimal, is right. The lines are right, the shape is right. There's nothing angular or ugly or out of place. It looks great. And the best news is, in the case of the Sprint, the value for money. You'd be hard put to spend more than 4.5, 5 grand on one of these things. You could build a great one for 3.5 grand, and that, for my money, is good value.